All right, I believe we're live on Rockfin, YouTube, Rumble. I'm going to wait for that red button on Rockfin to go live before we dive right in. Should go live any moment here. Pull up the Rumble link. And yes, there we go. This is the Propaganda Report's Drive Time News Blast. I'm joined with a special guest today, Garland, Favorito. Garland, I'm reading through the Trump document, the indictment, and it's like every page, it just makes me think of the work that you've been doing, especially the part where, so basically he lays out his argument, Jack Smith does in this indictment, as to why Trump is guilty, or why he knows that Trump knew that he was lying when he made claims of fraud in the election, which is the most absurd claim. It's the most empty document, free of evidence that I've ever seen reading through any document. It's all mind reading, but I was surprised that they put in there that it was stated by the CISA, which is an intel agency under the Department of Defense, that it was the most secure election in American history, which is impossible to prove. They haven't even tried to prove it, but they have laid that out in the indictment, which makes me, if I'm Trump's lawyer, I go, okay, you have to prove that first, because if you can't prove that, then you can't say that Trump didn't know if you can't even prove it. And then it goes on to talk about how they know it was secure because of all the election challenges that have failed. And that is where your work has come in. You've done a lot of that, those election challenges in Georgia. And what are your thoughts on that and just on the indictment overall?
Well, first of all, we won our case in the Georgia Supreme Court, and we still haven't seen the ballots yet because the Court of Appeals has not sent that remitter back to the Superior Court. And then the Superior Court judge is trying to transfer the case to a biased judge who oversaw the Fannie Willis investigation. So that alone really is enough. But you know, as you've been tracking us for the last 2 years, Brad, I mean, we have got overwhelming evidence in the state of Georgia of a massive attack on the election fraud or elections in Georgia, including fraud, errors, and irregularities. The Senate Judiciary Subcommittee concluded in their report that there was so much fraud, errors, and irregularities, systemic fraud, errors, and irregularities, that they should have never certified the results. So these things alone prove that CISA and Chris Krebs is a blatant liar. In fact, Chris Krebs was fired for his lie. And I don't think hardly anybody in America believes that the 2020 election was the most secure in American history. Even the people who won, they agree that there could have been fraud, errors, and irregularities. So what an absurd claim to make.
And it's so absurd. It almost feels like it is intentionally absurd to say that we don't care that we have no evidence. We're showing you that we will prosecute anyway. You mentioned Chris Krebs there, who was the head of CISA when that statement was issued, and Trump later fired him. In 2022, in April of 2022, he is on the record saying that the benefit of labeling the Hunter Biden laptop Russian disinformation, which was a disinformation campaign by the intel community, was that the media didn't talk about it during the 2020 election cycle. So they are citing an organization that was led by a guy that, as late as last year, is still saying, yeah, we did a good job labeling the Hunter Biden laptop Russian disinformation because it affected the election. And that's supposed to be why Trump should know that he lost, because the guy who lies about elections tells him that he lost.
Yeah, the swamp is deeper than anybody imagined, I think. Well, let me read one paragraph out of this Jack Smith indictment.
All right.
And this gets to what you were saying, Brad. One of the charges is a conspiracy to defraud the United States by using dishonesty, fraud, and deceit to impair, obstruct, and defeat the lawful federal government function by which the results of the presidential election are collected, counted, and certified by the federal government. And they quote 18 U.S.C. 371. Well, there was nothing dishonest, fraudulent, or deceitful in regards to what President Trump claimed about the 2020 election. There was fraud, errors, and irregularities, and he has led the election integrity movement in the country, rightfully so, by pointing this out. And he's right. The evidence proves that he's right. And, just because you have some corrupt judges who have given bogus rulings, that doesn't mean that the evidence is not there. They just don't want to look at it in a court. And it's really sad that the judges are in on this, but that's the fact of the case. And it is absolutely disgusting. As a part of the judicial system is really operating as a criminal enterprise to cover up the criminal activity of election fraud.
It's crazy. And at the same time, you have all the stuff with his son coming out and Joe's links to his son, and it's just blatant corruption. I'm not surprised anymore. I'm not going to be surprised when they do it in Georgia either, because there's really nothing. There's no evidence behind these cases. But I was surprised that they brought this one, because it feels to me like, to prove their case to a jury, if I'm Trump's lawyers, I am going to try and force them to have to establish what they're assuming, which is that the election is the most secure in American history. Because if you cannot do that, if you yourself can't even do that, then how can you claim that someone was intentionally lying about something that you have yet to prove? Which makes me wonder if they're actually going to have to examine some of these election challenges that have been kicked out of court for process and standing reasons. Will they actually get looked at on the merits because they brought this case? What do you think?
I think they will. The judges have, because we've had all these election challenges, and the judges didn't want to look at it because it's such a hot potato. Well, now they'll be forced to look at it. They can't go into court and claim that Donald Trump can't present evidence to defend himself. That's absurd. So I think it will come out, or they're probably just doing this for show to see how far they can push it and damage him politically, in hopes that the voters will be stupid enough to believe this kind of garbage. I don't think the voters are going to be this stupid. So we'll have to see how it plays out. Nobody really knows for sure. But I just see this has been very intriguing and giving Trump the opportunity he needs to put the evidence before the American people.
I do too, and I'm looking forward to seeing how that plays out. I know they're using a jury trial, and they have that judge that is like an anti-Trump judge, but I don't think you can show people the amount of evidence that is out there that undermines their claim and shows how corrupt they are. And I just feel like any jury that is not just completely being threatened is going to favor Trump in this case. But I guess we'll see. I want to show you something. This is another claim that they make. The state of Georgia is like 5 pages in the indictment that talk about the state of Georgia and Brad Raffensperger and that phone call that he was threatened. No, he wasn't threatened in the phone call. This is the dumbest argument. All you have to do is listen to it. I made like an 8-minute mashup of that phone call. I condensed it from like an hour to like 8 minutes, and I posted it a few weeks back. I need to get that back and reshare that. But he's just saying, if there's fraud out there, we just want to investigate the fraud, and then once you find what we need, you can put the resources elsewhere. He's not trying to pressure him. And Brad Raffensperger was actually asked directly on CNN if he felt pressured. So I'm putting our own self up there. I need to put the actual video up there. Hold on a second. Yeah, so he's asked by Caitlin Collins, who has this show on CNN now called The Source with Caitlin Collins, which it should be called The Anonymous Source that we just made up, because they don't ever actually have real sources or information. But she asked him, did he feel pressured during that phone call? And here's how he responded.
A report from the Washington Post. And so he had those facts. He called you. You explained again to him the numbers. But do you believe he was strong-arming you in to using your office to get him votes that he did not earn from voters?
Well, I knew that we didn't have the votes. We knew that we had checked out everything, every single allegation. In fact, he handpicked Bobby Christine, his U.S. attorney from the Southern District, to come up to Atlanta.
You notice he didn't answer the question. He paused for like 2 seconds and didn't answer the question.
Binkley, what is new about that?
Right. Yeah. So you don't, if you felt pressured, you say, yes, I felt pressured and strong-armed and intimidated. And quite frankly, I fear for my life even right now. But he just completely dodged the question and goes into his same talking points. If I'm Trump's lawyers, I play that. I say, he was asked directly, and he didn't even say he was pressured. Yet this indictment is claiming he was pressured, something he didn't even say.
Well, this is not unusual, Brad. I mean, Ted Metz, our buddy, who ran against him as the Libertarian candidate for Secretary of State, asked him point blank in the debate, which this is a great clip, of why he certified 240,000 votes, phantom votes that came in after the election and after he had reported on NBC the morning after that 4.7 million votes were cast and Donald Trump had an insurmountable lead. And they were going to be finished counting that day, Wednesday. Instead, he turned around and allowed counting of something to go on for 3 more days and certified 4.998 million votes. That turned not only the presidential race, but it turned the U.S. Senate race as well, because David Perdue would have won that without a runoff. So that's a little background, and he was asked the question twice and didn't answer it during the debate. So he's always dodged questions like this. This is actually nothing really too new.
Right. Yet it's the evidence that they're relying on in this indictment against Trump, who is running against Biden and his Justice Department. I don't know if you saw Biden's commercial that he dropped yesterday where he calls himself Dark Brandon. Did you see that?
Dark Brandon. No, I haven't seen that yet.
Dark Brandon is like his evil alter ego that Trump supporters labeled him, and he kind of is embraced. And on the same day that Trump was indicted or arrested, he has this Dark Brandon mug, and Biden is drinking his coffee, and he goes, "I like my coffee dark," which, look, it is dark. There's no doubt about that, but his performance was very weak. If he's going to be a supervillain, really own the supervillain. He looked like he was half asleep to me. So I would have liked a little higher production from Biden on that. But I was watching you played some clips. I can't remember where I saw it, but there was is in Georgia, and there was a bunch of people who were fighting for election integrity, who were speaking out. Where was that? I think it was earlier this week. The state election board or something?
State election board. Wow. That was amazing, Binkley. We had that room down there at Cap 341 seats about 200 people. It was packed out. People were out in the halls. 50 people testified. More people were across the street. And they just were very articulate, and they all wanted the same thing. They wanted hand-marked paper ballots counted at the polls, and they wanted that's on security-grade paper, and they wanted publicly recorded hand counts. And that's what, with those two things, you can ensure that a machine will not manipulate elections, or at least you would have some hope that the machine did not manipulate the elections, as it appears to have done in 2020 and 2022.
Yeah. How did everybody who was at that, because it was packed full, this state voting board hearing, and you're right, they were articulate and they were enthusiastic. They're calling them Brad Ratzberger, and the room was electric, and I think that they were the people who they were talking to were probably a little bit not used to that, and it was kind of cool. How did everybody find out about that? From you, or is that just people finding out on their own?
Well, no, we mass blast that, and not just our group, but there's 4 groups that are working tightly together in Georgia. One is Cause of America, Mike Lindell's group. One is our group, Voter GA. Then we have Georgians for Truth. And we have CDF, which is Citizens for Defending Freedom. We're all working together for the same cause. And we all blasted that out, asked everybody to come, and people scripted out what they wanted to say. They knew they only had 2 minutes. Most of them did a really good job of getting in their comments. It's just amazing. In fact, we just posted, even the comments went on for 4 hours. And it was 2:10 in the afternoon before they actually got to the second order of business. So Gabe Sterling had gone on social media 3 days earlier and said it was a tiny minority of people.
Not at all. Yeah.
who wanted this. Well, the state election board has never been packed out that. Well, I've been to some crowded meetings before, but no, I've never seen over 200 people in a meeting like that.
I was shocked when I watched the video of that and how just kind of rowdy it was in there, but in a good way. And people were laughing, they were having fun with it, and they were making their points. I might go to the next one. There's another one is it October or September when the next one is?
Yeah, the next one will be, I think, let's see, it's 3 months. So that would probably put us in October, first week in October. I think it's probably the first Tuesday.
That's fantastic. Yeah. That's how you put pressure on them right there. It feels like the way the process works has revealed itself, and people are paying closer attention than ever before. Yeah. 10, 15 years ago, you were paying attention to elections. Most people weren't, not like they are today anyway. And that has put more scrutiny and more heat on the people. They can't cover things up and get away with it as easily as they used to be able to, right. Which makes me wonder if we have this arrest of Matt DePerno in Michigan, who he ran for attorney general up there, and his opponent arrested him. They call him an election denier. There was 2 other people that he is associated with up there who they call election deniers, who they also arrested. And I believe he got arrested on the same day Trump was indicted. Are they going after people who are challenging their narrative and taking action to reveal evidence against them? Because from what I understand, he revealed evidence that showed that some of the voting machines were actually connected to the internet. He has all the documents you can read through them on his website and decide for yourself. Are they going after people like that? And are you worried that you could be targeted?
Well, this indictment involving Matt DePerno has taken the war to a new level. Before, it was against Donald Trump, obviously because Donald Trump is opposing Joe Biden. So Joe Biden or his handlers probably went out and got this Jack Smith and the DOJ to drum up these charges against Trump. And as you said before, there is still no crime. We've had an impeachment with no crime, then another impeachment when Donald Trump wasn't even in office. That's illegitimate and unconstitutional. Then you had the Alvin Bragg thing, again, no crime specified. And now we have another one with no real crime specified. So this whole thing, they're trying to hang their hat on this, the claim for no election fraud in 2020, because they know they stole the election. That's the only reason that they would be doing this ridiculous stuff. I mean, all of it's ridiculous. We could have Yeah. If we want to prove who won the election, you simply make the ballots public record, like we've been advocating for 15 years. And then there's no Democrat or Republican. We can always agree who won. There's no dispute. But the DePerno thing is really disturbing because it takes it to another level. Now it's not just about Trump. It's about every citizen in America who talks about fraud. Matt DePerno is an attorney. He brought a legitimate case to the Superior Court of Michigan, and it had to do with it was a local election, is the case that he actually brought, and that kind of escalated when they found out that 6,300 votes swapped in Antrim County, Michigan, from the Joe Biden to I'm sorry, for Donald Trump to Joe Biden.
And they admit that. They just say it's a mistake, and they admit that, and he investigated it like he should have, and now he's being persecuted for it.
Right. So, and they're trying to claim that he tricked the judge. Well, the judge is not stupid. The judge ruled that he should look at the machines because the votes flipped, 6,300 of them flipped. And there was no real explanation. It's never truly been explained. And the clerk up there in Antrim County deleted the files and to all the log files to prevent the real evidence from coming out. If anybody should have been indicted, it would have been her. But instead, Dana Nessel, who may or may not have been intoxicated as she normally is, decided to come up with this crazy scheme to indict Matt DePerno, an attorney, for bringing a legitimate case to court. These are absurd things that are going on, and that's what happens when you let communists control your state.
I think you're exactly right. I think you're referring to when she was escorted out of a football game or a basketball game or something like that at Michigan State.
Yeah, it was a Michigan, University of Michigan, Michigan State football game, I believe. I think according to the Gateway Pundit, but they even showed her picture, and she was pretty far gone with her hat pulled down, covering her eyes. So, Dana Nessel and Jocelyn Benson up there, who's the Secretary of State, are, I can't say anything good about them.
It's awful. I'm glad that it's being exposed and people are seeing it. What worries me is that I don't want to say half. I think they over-exaggerate how many people just blindly support all of this stuff, but the large number of people that are just celebrating such an obvious abuse of power. Sir Tim of Tunnels on Rockfin makes the point here of interesting that the 4 charges cut their own throat by saying Trump was allowed to do these things under the First Amendment. He's exactly right. He starts off the indictment by saying you're allowed to say these things under the First Amendment because he has to do that to justify all of the times Democrats have done it, like Stacey Abrams and Hillary Clinton. And then he goes on to say, but Trump can't do it because Trump knew that he was lying. It's the same argument they always make. It was an innocent mistake by the Democrats. It was an insidious, evil plot by Trump. And there's no law, really, the conspiracy law, the evidence that we've been talking about. What would you tell a jury? Like what'd be the strongest piece of evidence or argument that you would tell a jury who was hearing this stuff maybe for the first time?
Now, which case? Are we talking about Trump?
Talking about Trump. Yeah.
And are we talking about Georgia?
Well, I'm talking about the indictment right now. Well, I do want to talk about Georgia in a second, but just this indictment that he was just arrested for on Tuesday.
Well, I mean, first of all, it's clear from just Georgia evidence alone that Donald Trump did not lie. He told the truth. And the people who are blaming the indictment are the liars.
Right. There's still a case open. Like there's still cases open that you were granted standing for about the election, and they're having a trial on the assumption that all of those challenges have been defeated.
We have a half a dozen cases open right now, all involving 2020 and 2022 elections.
What do you think is going to happen in Georgia?
In what regard?
And when it comes to Fani Willis and the indictment that almost definitely is going to come down at this point?
Well, we were hearing that she's going to go after some of the alternate electors. And that's why I sent you that little slide deck that we can talk about. There's speculation that she's going to try to drum up a racketeering charge against the former president. How do you do that? He's not involved in any racket. He just exercised his First Amendment right. Exercising your First Amendment right is not racketeering. So,
right.
So everybody has a right to speak what they want to say, and that's if they're right or wrong. So in this case, is not only did he have the right to say it, but he was also correct when he said it. He was right, had the right, and he was right.
And these fake electors, they call them. That's a made-up term, correct?
Oh, it's absolutely fabricated. And the little presentation will explain that. So it's an orchestrated term. It's orchestrated by certain areas in the media. They're all using that exact same term. So you can tell it's orchestrated. And that indicates to you that it's probably coming from the Central Intelligence Agency and their media assets throughout the world. I think we talked about this on your show before, but the Church Committee back in 1975 found that the CIA had 200 media assets working worldwide. That was 75. How many do they have today? In 2016, the book Prostitutes confirmed that they were still operating and trying to lure America into the Ukraine war. That book was written by a German professor. He ends up having a heart attack before the book is released in America. That's pretty serious stuff. He was basically an insider who exposed the whole thing. So the operation is still running in 2016. So
out in the open. It's
Yeah.
like Mockingbird 2.0, supercharged. Every network has former CIA head or former NSA head who they roll out as an expert to speak on a subject that is almost always about how bad and how much of a Russian Trump is. They even bring out, what's the guy, his name just slipped my mind, but the one who had a stroke a few years back, who used to be the head of the NSA.
Well, I think you're talking about James Clapper. I'm not sure if he had a stroke, but he was the head of the NSA. And he actually was found to have lied to Congress about the information, I think it was the PRISM that Ed Snowden report exposed. So I'm not sure if that's him, but that's an example. This guy is a commentator on CNN, and he really should be behind bars.
Yes, absolutely. And I was thinking about Michael Hayden is who I was thinking about, who is just like Clapper, but Hayden had a stroke a couple years ago, and he has aphasia. And he very clearly has aphasia. Aphasia is when it's a communication thing. It's kind of like the big ogre-looking guy who's in the Senate. And it almost looks like abuse. I feel sorry for him, but they bring him out there and then they just say, Michael Hayden's here to talk about how Trump schemed to do blah, 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 and how it's Russian linked. And he just comes out there and they ask him questions and he basically nods his head. Then they roll him back off the screen. It's the most disturbing thing. I guess he signed off on that in his, his power of attorney or something. But I don't know. I'm having a hard time getting these slides to share for some reason. I don't know what's going on with my screen.
Well,
what's in these? I'll get them on screen somehow. If you can set us up for it while I play with this.
Yeah. All righty. So I'm going to go ahead and pull those up as well so that I can talk to them. There was, first of all, oh, you got them?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, that's perfect. So first of all, there are two precedents for this that we'll talk about. That's a picture of the Electoral Commission from 1876, when the disputed race between Rutherford B. Hayes and Samuel Tilden for president in 1876. And I've got 19 there, which is completely wrong. Should have been 18. So that's a mistake. But yeah, let's go on the next slide and we'll talk about why there's no such thing as a fake elector. I think I'll explain it.
All right.
If you can advance.
Yeah, I'm trying to. Oh, there we go.
There we go. So here's what happened in Georgia. The Democrats and the Republicans selected their electors in March of 2020. That's about 6 months before the election. And as you know, the electors cast their electoral college votes for president. Now there's been two disputed elections. One was in 1876 when Louisiana, Florida, and South Carolina had disputes over their election, and they had dual electors, just like happened in 2020. And that race was between Rutherford B. Hayes, Republican, and Samuel Tilden, the Democrat. And then an even better example, which we'll get into in a little bit more, is that there were dual electors in the 1960 Hawaii race. And oops, I think there's a mistake there. I didn't have the word Georgia in there. I didn't proof these slides well enough. And the disputed contest, that was between Richard Nixon and John F. Kennedy. And we'll tell you all about this, and you can find this on electrictruth.com. That's a great resource site for all this.
All right.
And so here's what happened in Georgia. The contingent electors were we call them contingent electors. They were selected by unanimous vote of the state GOP executive committee back on March 2020. We were talking about. And they were certified to the Georgia Secretary of State's office the next day. And the Secretary of State published the names of those electors as qualified and nominated candidates, which an elector for president is the one that cast the vote for president. So it's 16 of those people based on the popular vote.
The Secretary of State published those as legitimate.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's no dispute. So they all became contingent electors, at least the Republicans did, when President Trump issued an election challenge on December 4th, 2020. And he filed it. So that's the way it really works. That's the way the electors work. It's the way they always work. And they have, if there's a challenge, then the one of the parties, whoever is challenging, is the contingent electors. This is the way it's happened in 1960, the way it happened in 1876. So the attorneys for Donald Trump filed this legal challenge on December 4th in 2020 in Fulton County. The lawsuit is required by law to be heard in 20 days, but Fulton did not even assign a judge to it by then. And it didn't get scheduled to a hearing until later on, and it was scheduled for January 8th. Well, that was 2 weeks after the statutory deadline had expired, and it was 2 days after Congress had counted and certified the electoral votes. So that's pretty amazing. But then, so this elector meeting that took place, which is required by the Federal Act of 1878, it occurred on December 14th, 2020, and that challenge was still active at the time of this meeting. So these electors were operating in good faith in the public, and they cast their votes to preserve a judicial remedy in case Donald Trump prevailed in the contest.
So as opposed to being in like a shadowy room doing a fake elector scheme, the way they describe it on the news.
Right. I mean, they did so. It was in public. The door was open at the Capitol, and it was even reported on Atlanta television. So, and AJC, Greg Bluestein, has just lied through his teeth on this, claiming that it was like a behind closed door type thing.
Yeah, he does. Yeah. Just
a blatant lie.
He gets to go on MSNBC and he just starts lying his backside off. It's I don't know, like Jake Tapper, at least he's getting paid the good money to lie on CNN national. Maybe that's what he's going for, because you're not getting as much to lie at the AJC. But they're all controlled by these Google News Initiative networks and all of these. They fund all this money down through it, and you might as well be watching CNN and MSNBC. It's just branded AJC, and I can't even stand it anymore. I used to like the AJC when I was a kid.
Well, Bluestein is triple dipping because he's got that fake book out there as well, and that has a bunch of garbage in it.
What's his book?
I can't even remember the title of it at the moment, but I think it's called Flipped. It claims that the flipping of Georgia from blue to red was legitimate, and we know it's not.
It's absolutely not legitimate. Where do you think this is going to go? Do you think there's any chance that they get a conviction in any of these cases against Trump?
I don't see how they could. I think they're just trying to string him out, harass him, and but you never know. I mean, look at you talking about the corrupt judge up in New York. He was an obvious Democrat, a campaign contributor,
Yeah.
and he actually, his daughter worked, I believe, for Kamala Harris, and she's a campaign strategist. So clearly, that judge should have been recused, one way or the other. He's not fit to serve on the case. It's a fiasco, and it's a disgrace that he would even have been picked in the first place. But they had to have a corrupt judge to make some kind of a ridiculous decision.
He campaigned on getting Trump, if I recall, and Fannie Willis might have as well. I don't remember exactly with her.
Yeah, that was Alvin Bragg. Alvin Bragg, the DA, campaigned on.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, the judge didn't, but he's a definite Democrat Party campaign contributor, which would automatically disqualify him. I'm assuming that they will attempt to get him disqualified. I don't have the status of that case though.
Yeah, the problem with these elected DAs and judges is that if they don't go after Trump, when they are so clearly aligned that way, then their opponents in the Democrat Party are going to say they didn't do anything about Trump and they had all this time. So it just becomes a battle of who's going to persecute their political opponents to get votes on the Democrat side. It's so corrupt. Yeah. It's controlled. I don't even want to say George Soros anymore. He's passed it off to his son. But those same forces there. We have thank you, Garland, for your hard work from frightening me. And how can people help you?
Well, voterga.org, you can go and get information. There's all sorts of things we have out there, but one of the best ways is to donate. We are a 501c3 nonpartisan nonprofit, so your donations are tax deductible, and we are volunteers. We don't take a salary or anything like that out of VoterGA.
Fantastic. So check that out. And you do a lot of events. You organized that voter hearing, had everybody show up. I think that's super cool. That's how we put pressure on them. Do you get? I know I look you up. I do a search to see what people have been lying about you. Every time you come on the show, and I always find a couple things. There was one thing that I can't remember who it was. It might have been Axios or something that said that they had asked you about a claim you made and you refused to respond, which I know that didn't happen because you always respond to requests like that. And then I found this. There was a forum, and it was like a college football forum, and somehow the electors and all that stuff came up, and there's like 3 pages of people talking about you, and you'll feel good to know that there was only one guy who called you a crazy conspiracy kook, while like a dozen people were just providing all this evidence of all the stuff that you've done and just slamming this other person, making him look like a fool. So you got a lot of people backing you and supporting you out there, and the mainstream is certainly not going to allow that to happen. Do people ever threaten you or anything?
No, I got a couple of phone calls that were threatening after the Georgia Public Broadcasting put out this false article back in June of last year claiming that I was a conspiracy theorist, nutcase, all this other stuff. And then I had a couple of calls like that after that. People don't understand, these media don't understand that when they lie about you, they are trying to agitate folks against you based on their lies, not from something that I actually did that was true. That's a different story. But that can be life-threatening. So, but I can't say that that really happened to me. It was more of a crank call type situation. So I will probably really I haven't been that threatened. We're nonpartisan. So most of this banner back and forth is between the Democrats and Republicans, or it's the Democrats bashing the Republicans for lying. And the Republicans, some of them are too weak to fight back and tell the truth. But we've kind of stayed under the fray by being nonpartisan for most of the time.
Absolutely. What happened to Brian Kemp?
In what regard?
He is the media on the left, CNN. He is their favorite Republican right now.
Oh yeah, well they want to. Speculation is that DeSantis has asked him to be his vice president if he was elected.
No.
Yeah, that's quite.
Wow.
So that's and of course he had an adversarial relationship with Donald Trump. So that's part of the, at least at the end, we knew that was going to be a problem when Donald Trump first endorsed him. Now, he never should have made that endorsement. We kind of pulled our hair on that, but really it wasn't a good choice because, the other choice was Casey Cagle and he was not really a good choice either. So, but we had some other good candidates back in the primary. There were 5 people running for the governor, and there were a couple of good candidates back then.
Do you think that Chris Christie has a legitimate shot at beating Trump?
No, I don't think anybody has a legitimate shot at beating Trump in an honest election.
Right.
Could they steal it from him? Possibly so. But, Trump is immensely popular because he stands for the people.
He has like a 50-point lead in the primary. And I love how they bring Chris Christie on, and he gets more attention and more airtime than anybody else, and they take him seriously. And he was literally polling at 0% when he entered the race.
That's funny. Yeah, and he's probably still about there. Hey, Binkley, if you have time, there were 2 slides we missed. I think the audience might get a kick out of on that fake elector thing.
Yeah, for sure.
The last 2 slides showed the 2 examples of 1876 and also of 1960. And this would be great for the audience to know, because it mirrors exactly what happened in Georgia in 2020. I don't know if you can get that back.
Yeah, let me pull that back up.
But it's I think they would get a real kick out of it because it really shows how absurd this whole fake election thing is. So yeah, it's going down about 5 and one more.
I think that's the end of the slides.
Oh, my bad. I'm sorry. I did not get you the correct deck. Well, let me tell you about, let's go back to the second slide and I'll tell you about Hawaii and, it kind of says so here. There was a big dispute. Louisiana, Florida, South Carolina, they all had different electors, and that was resolved in the U.S. Congress, as you saw in the picture. But the other one that I wanted to mention in Hawaii, it was exactly the same thing. Richard Nixon had 3 electoral votes. He was declared the winner in Hawaii. The Democrats challenged the race, and they had their own dual electors. They sent the paperwork to Washington to challenge, and they eventually won in court, and the 3 electoral votes were taken away from Richard Nixon and given to John F. Kennedy after the trial, which is exactly what happened here in Georgia. It was going to happen when Donald Trump should have had a trial, and he didn't. And had he done so, who knows? It could have come out differently. So, but that's the precedent. The precedent in 1960 in Hawaii is exactly the same precedent that occurred in 2020 for Donald Trump. Exactly the same here in Georgia between Trump and Biden. So that's the irony of it. If it's a Democrat who wants to challenge, then it's wonderful. But if a Republican wants to challenge, then, he's committed all kinds of fraud and stuff and should be indicted. So there's a double standard in America, and I just wanted to point that out. It's kind of absurd, and I can say that because I'm not a Republican, never have been really associated with the Republican Party itself, nor the Democrat Party either.
Yeah, I tell people all the time, the first time I met you was when you were talking about the race between Karen Handel and John Ossoff back in 2017, maybe. And you were advocating, you thought that it had been stolen from John Ossoff.
It appeared that was the case, although we never had enough evidence to prove that. But there was certainly some votes that appear to have been shifted away from Ossoff and possibly to Handel. Maybe it wasn't enough to make a difference, but we documented all that, and those studies are up on the voterga.org studies tab.
Yeah. See, people have this, because of the way the media propaganda apparatus targets people with this emotional, tribal, divide and conquer propaganda nonsense, it just erodes binary. It creates binary thinking, erodes all nuance. And if you defend something that's obviously, if you say this is corrupt and you just point that out, you are automatically the worst of the other side, when you might not even be on the other side at all. Like, they don't let you take a position that's not one or the other, because they need to keep people thinking that everybody is the enemy who disagrees with their narrative. And that, if being able to break free from that binary thought, I think would make their whole power structure crumble. Just being able to say, I can see corruption and also not be someone who is just a MAGA Trumper. Like, I feel sorry for people who, there's this video clip, I don't know if you saw it, but after he was arraigned, Trump crashes a wedding at one of his golf clubs in New Jersey, and there's somebody's got cell phone footage of him, and Trump's walking in going, yeah, and everybody's like cheering him on. And then he walks over to the bride and groom, and he's like, you're so beautiful. You're so beautiful. This woman, look at her. She's so beautiful. And then right as the video cuts off, he goes over, looks at the guy and goes, you're so beautiful. I mean, it's hilarious. And people who just hate him so much, I feel sorry that they can't enjoy how truly funny of a person he is. Like, you can not like Trump and also think he's funny. Both of those things can be true, but people's brains are just like eroded right now.
Yeah. Well, it's either, it's what do you want to do? You want to look at his personality or his policy. So,
right. Yeah, exactly.
There's issues. I understand that some people have issues with his personality. I get that, even though, like you said, he's really funny on occasions. But the bottom line is, are his policies right for America? That's what people need to be judging.
Exactly. And CNN was reporting on it at the same time I saw that video. There was a lower third text graphic that said, Trump is deflated and sour and angry after the arraignment. And meanwhile, there's a video clip of him like partying.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, Garland.
Lying to their teeth.
Absolutely. Anything I missed? Anything you want to cover before we get out of here?
No, I think we covered everything. That's really, I think we got it. All three of those things are very important.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for joining me on the show. I always love having you on. I forget that you've published a book. I stumbled across that last night when I was reading your stuff, and you don't ever advertise any of that. Most people go on shows in the mainstream media and stuff, and they're selling stuff and they're trying to bring in millions of dollars. You're just trying to get the information out there. So I would encourage people to go donate to Garland, help his efforts, buy his book. I think what your book is about, is it in the aftermath of 9/11?
The book is called Our Nation Betrayed, but in the last three chapters of the second edition, it does go into 9/11 a little bit. It was the first published book that questioned the government's version of 9/11. And that occurred, we published that back in June of 2002, about 9 months after the attack.
Fantastic. Yeah, so we have a comment from Very Safe Biolabs about Trump, his Rosie O'Donnell comments, his humor there. Yeah, totally. Thank you again, Garland. Support Garland's work, VoterGA on Twitter, Facebook, VoterGA also, and we will talk to you guys next time.
And if you want trust, expose truth and demand transparency.
The T-shirt, so you can get those at VoterGA.
No, we don't have those through fulfillment, but if you're in Georgia, you can pick one up. We're going all over the state now. So. When's
your next appearance?
We'll be down in Southeast Georgia this upcoming weekend. Not this weekend. I guess it'll be next weekend.
Fantastic.
So we'll be in three different places: Jessup, Bryan County, and Savannah.
All right, man. You're everywhere. You're spreading the word in Georgia, which clearly it's working. And these on the ground efforts are the way to do it. So keep up the good fight, man. You're inspiring a lot of people.
You too. Likewise. Keep up the good fight.
We'll see y'all later. Have a fantastic rest of your day.
Bye-bye.